Yeah, like I said earlier this morning, so I have been working with Indigenous and community conserved conservation areas, but I'm in no way an expert. I'm just a technical person that comes and supports, and so I thought we would have this discussion today. Just an interesting exchange from people working on the ground on this topic across the world and see if there's any commonalities. So I put together several questions. These, we don't have to touch on any of these, and I'm happy for the discussion to just kind of flow freely, but I thought we could start with it. And then whoever feels like answering, just go ahead and raise your hand and we can go from there. So the first one was just something that I know most of you touched on in your presentations, this idea of how do you balance the dual objectives of wildlife conservation and human empowerment. A lot of the topics covered in your sessions were ways to empower or ways to engage or make the community members enthusiastic about wildlife conservation, how to keep them on your side and working for the betterment of the natural resources in the area. So how have you balanced that, and how has the integration of SMART or any other conservation technology, how do you find that has either helped or hindered or presented challenges? Anyone? Whoever wants to go first.
I could try. Unfortunately, I'm a technical person too, so okay. I wish some of my colleagues were here that work a lot more closely on these processes. In the case of PNG, it's quite an interesting context where 90% of the land in PNG is still owned by traditional custodians, which is pretty incredible. So I think in the case of use, communities have been at the heart and are essential to decision making at all facets of the management of the conservation area, and they've established and set up the processes by which it should work, and some of those processes haven't been working, and we're going through a new project where we're trying to work out, what are the roles and responsibilities for the wider stakeholders, particularly different levels of government, because it can be challenging to get them involved and ensure accountability and ensure people are doing what they're expected to be doing by communities, and there's not confusion about that. Use was set up with a core conservation area, with area that was mapped and pledged by communities for conservation. So they were central to deciding which areas should be preserved for biodiversity conservation and which areas are set up for sustainable resource use. And that's been the process that's there, but there's always issues in I guess, ensuring people are all on the same page about how those areas are managed, and that's just a process of bringing people along on the journey, I guess.
Yeah, one of the ways we encourage the community we work with is through our sustainable livelihood program, where we provide improved cocoa seedlings for the community women and bush mango. We do that by mapping of the farms to make sure, first of all, that those farms are not in the protected area or near the protected area. So these community members are meant to sign a conservation agreement that having access to these improved cocoa seedlings, they won't go into the protected area either for harvesting of bush mango or farming in the protected area. This has improved the way they see conservation and how they protect their area.
I'm going to put Rebecca on the spot here. Sorry. Maybe you could speak to, the CBMN process where you're kind of, it's not really a competition, but you're kind of encouraging people to record more data, and then you do the prizes and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually something I've been asking people about on the side, is the incentive programs that are offered. Because in some cases you have employees that are paid, and part of their data, or part of their job is to collect the data. And for us, it's volunteers. So it's harvesters that are out collecting their own food, and then we're asking them to take time out of their schedule and take their hands out in freezing cold climates to take the time to do this. And it's also an environment where there's a history of a lot of mistrust between the communities and the government. So basically, to get the buy-in to get things started, we are offering gas money. So people have to travel really long distances by snowmobile, several hundred kilometers. It costs quite a bit. So to try to get people to start and to sign up, a lot of people do so for the gas money. And we also offer awards, recognition awards, that are targeted mostly towards people who record observation records. So they're actually not just tracking, they're taking that extra time to put in the extra data. So that gets a lot of people hooked. And then once we have worked with people for a few years and you get one community say to the next, you know, this is a good program, we've seen benefits from it, then that has started to pay off as well. So.
Great, thank you.
I could just add a few things if you're looking for commonalities. I mean, the incentives are an absolute key component of what we do here in Namibia with our rangers. We have a whole suite of different incentives we provide, all based on values. So a lot of the design comes down to understanding the context and what motivates the people that you're trying to motivate, whether it's data collection or you know, patrol effort or whatever it is that they're doing, providing the right training, giving them recognition for that. We do award ceremonies. We do some monetary performance payments, some non-monetary. We've gotten into soccer leagues and getting into schools, obviously beyond the SMART context, but although we have talked about using SMART for the football league too. But yeah, the incentives are absolutely key, I think, to motivate good data collection.
Leon's gonna hold off for the moment. Yeah. Any thoughts from any of our other colleagues?
In South America, it's kind of different because communities are owners of their own land, but there's no private land inside the communities. So when we talk about payments, they are not real payments because the community assigned the people that is going to work in certain things. So what we did is to give incentives, economic incentives, but it's not for the payment of only one person. The incentives go through the whole community. So the whole community decides what to do with the money that they receive.
Is there a specific representative that receives it and is responsible for managing that in the community?
Depends the community. So in most communities there is a president, but the president can delegate a person to receive the money and for a certain time, and then they change. They just decide that they change, and they change the person that is going to work.
Yeah, in Kenya, I'll talk about an example with MWCT. They have a program where they call it wildlife pay. So whenever livestock is killed in a community setup, they'll always reimburse the communities by paying them a certain amount of money depending on what type of animal has attacked their wildlife. And with that, it creates some sort of, I feel like, ownership to the wildlife, and also wanting to protect them, because if we are getting benefits from this wildlife, we'll put proper measures in making sure that our strategies or their strategies in protecting their livestock work. And then also livelihoods such as providing bursaries for their students, building hospitals, employing their people as rangers also makes sure that the communities value this wildlife because they're getting benefits, whether directly or indirectly.
Great. Thank you. Yeah?
Hola a todos. Bueno, con respecto a la pregunta, los vigilantes comunales con los que trabajamos son vigilantes que no reciben algún dinero de por medio, no como los guardaparques, no son vigilantes voluntarios, pero el beneficio que ellos ven de hacer la vigilancia, hacer el manejo, es también poder aprovechar esos recursos, pero poder comercializarlos a mercados que paguen un dinero justo por todo el esfuerzo del manejo de recursos que ellos hacen, ¿no? Eso es un poco difícil, pero con ayuda de instituciones como WCS, el gobierno u otras instituciones, vamos buscando esos tipos de mercados para que ellos puedan acceder a un beneficio económico, ¿no? Porque una comunidad que no tiene un beneficio económico va a aprovechar sus recursos de manera desordenada, talando los árboles, que es la fuente más rápida para obtener ingresos. Pero si tú le demuestras a la comunidad que manejando los recursos, aprovechando y teniendo un pago justo por todo ese esfuerzo de aprovechamiento, entonces la comunidad sí se ve beneficiada y sí se compromete a las acciones de manejo, a las acciones de vigilancia.
You got that?
I am not an expert in translation, so I will do my best. So in Peru, what they are trying to do is to sustain communities so they can sell specific things that communities go through. For example, I think charapas,
Peces,
fish, and
especies de caza, mamíferos.
also animals that they go for hunting, and because they are managing their own territories, so they receive incentives, money, so they can invest in things inside the community to improve the management and to keep fishing and hunting and to have another kind of incomes rather than hunting and fishing. So this will not be possible without the help of WCS that work with them in management plans for communities and also for other kind of conservation areas. So they give training, they give capacity building, and they try to maintain this sustainable to the next years.
Thank you also for taking on the translation. We have Diego's going to come help out at 2:30 as well. Yeah. Great, thank you. So next question for everybody, and feel free to jump in. I think this will be more relevant for some of you. The traditional ecological knowledge or the traditional indigenous knowledge has come up, certainly, and Rebecca spoke to it specifically about the pros and cons of scientific data versus the traditional indigenous information. And I'm just wondering, were there efforts in your organizations, specific efforts to integrate that into the monitoring, into the development of data models, into the management plans, and are there ways to harness it, to integrate it, and to use it in your protection efforts? Anybody?
Okay, I can start. So yeah, I did speak about this in the presentation, and I think largely it's been incorporated from the beginning with our program for community-based monitoring in the North, because the mandate of the organization is specifically to integrate or to at least consider the best information available from both science and the traditional knowledge systems. The real challenge, I guess, has been in the scale and in the scope, because science does look at things kind of in isolation, or they might want to study just polar bears or just caribou, whereas the Inuit traditional knowledge system is very holistic. Humans are considered part of the ecosystem, and you can't talk about whales without talking about sea ice, without talking about caribou, and then foxes and lemming populations. So everything is very holistic. That part is really challenging, I think, to try to capture in any type of a kind of standardized data collection form. One thing that's been really beneficial has been the inclusion of an option to record an audio note, because the Inuit culture is traditionally very oral in nature, and that's how information is shared. There's an opportunity with every data record for people to add their own notes and observations, often in English, but also often in Inuktitut, and we work with those to get them translated and transcribe them into the comments section within the database. And then that way we have kind of a searchable way to find keywords, which at least in theory allows for some social science interpretation, although we haven't actually gone far enough yet to explore that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to pose the question for PNG. I don't know if there's anything similar. I've not been to PNG, but you know, your description of the access to the communities is very similar to my understanding or my experience in the Arctic. You know, you're supplied exclusively by planes. Sometimes there's ships, and you know, communities are very reliant on this network, and so it just sounds very similar to your use case. I'm just wondering if it's a similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that framework you sort of presented for sort of thinking about how those different sort of knowledge systems from science and traditional sort of work together. I don't know if we're quite at that point yet. I mean, a lot of the people within the TKCP PNG team that are in the lay office are traditional owners from the communities, and then all of the rangers and the staff that work there are all community members. So Jeppesen is used throughout SMART in the way that we collect information, and there's traditional methods that are used in the way that they collect this information, observe and record animals. But looking into the sort of the social sciences to be able to better incorporate that at a systematic level by recognising, you know, the more traditional way of recapturing it is something that we're trying to explore. There's been anthropological and sort of ethnological work done in there, but I don't know if we've captured it at a systematic way yet. So it's something that we're aspiring to, and it's we've got a research and monitoring prioritisation work come up, and that's one of the big focuses of our next work.
Any other thoughts? No?
Yeah, I think I also still give an example of an organization called Gravy Zebra Trust, and with that they use a lot of traditional knowledge in the way they even employ their staff in collecting data, because when they're employing these people, they employ them from the communities, and they do not have to necessarily change the way they conduct their daily activities. So the Samburu traditionally, or the pastoralists, and wherever they go to take their livestock for grazing, they're the same areas where they get the gravies. So when they're employed, they do not have to change their locations. So whatever traditional knowledge that they have, because traditionally they follow the gravy to follow where there is water. So they use the gravy as an indicator of water and pasture. So they'll follow the gravy with their livestock, and by so doing, when they're given gadgets to collect data using SMART, they're not changing anything really. So I think that's a way of incorporating their traditional knowledge into data collection. And you'll find that maybe at times they'll say certain areas they're gravies, but when you look at it scientifically, the climatic conditions, the pasture available in that area do not support gravy populations in the area. But they'll tell you traditionally, we used to have gravies here. Traditionally, we used to have nurseries here for gravies. So, yeah.
Thank you.
¿Sí? Ya. Bueno, ¿cómo se usa el conocimiento tradicional de las comunidades en el monitoreo de las poblaciones, ¿no? Esa es la pregunta, el monitoreo de las poblaciones, ¿no? Entonces, en nuestro caso, estamos implementando un ACR, Área de Conservación Regional, donde se realizan monitoreos de peces, mamíferos, de caza y también palmeras, ¿no?
So in Peru, they are working in several ecological monitoring in fish, mammals, and some palms in some regional conservation areas.
La implementación del SMART para este tipo de monitoreos ha significado un quiebre, ¿no? Un antes y un después en la participación de las comunidades. ¿Por qué? Porque, como dije en la presentación, el uso del Smart Móvil acorta las brechas de falta de escritura o de falta de lectura en las comunidades, que es muy común, porque es más fácil para ellos usar el Smart Móvil que usar una planilla de campo, ¿no? Y ellos participan en todo el proceso del monitoreo de esas poblaciones, ¿no?
So when they start using a smart mobile, they see a very extreme change because some communities are not used to write things in paper, so they help a lot when they start using a smart mobile. So he said that it's very important to get involved with the communities and they empower the information that they are collecting.
Pero siempre bajo la supervisión de un especialista, ¿no? Lo que se hacía antes es que se llevaba investigadores y los comuneros solamente participaban como apoyo o como guías, pero ahora lo que se hace es involucrar a los comuneros en la toma de datos, pero siempre bajo la supervisión de algún especialista porque se tiene que cumplir protocolos estandarizados para saber o para que el monitoreo, los resultados sean buenos resultados, ¿no?
So before, scientists just go to the communities and collect information by themselves, but now the communities are involved in this process. But he mentioned that it's very important to try to understand the patterns that the communities made this observation, but always with a clear understanding of what they are collecting for. And this is very important to have a scientist that is linked with these investigations.
Y finalmente, al hacer este tipo de involucramiento, hacemos que las comunidades sientan que los resultados son de ellos al momento de devolver la información.
And when the communities feel that they are involved in these investigations, so it's more clear the path. It's more clear that the communities own the information and the investigations are from them. The scientists are not using them just to collect the data.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to move on with the next question. No, okay. All right, next question. Probably should be able to get an answer out of all of you for this. So obviously, conservation technology is very helpful, but as you've all discussed, there's challenges that these communities face, and using and deploying conservation technology like SMART in these in remote places, in places where perhaps they've never used anything like this before. Just wondering, in your efforts to deploy SMART or other conservation technologies, what challenges have you faced? What, I wouldn't say innovative solutions, but what ways have you worked around problems that have arisen to kind of overcome and move forward with, a plan that you wanted to implement?
I can go. Well, in Ecuador, we have a very specific challenge with communities, and is the lack of internet. So we want to use Collect in the communities because we feel that is the more convenient app for the smart suite that is going to fit their needs. But because they don't have like a very broad connections with internet, what we thought is that we are going to have 2 cell phones for each community. So every 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks that we go to the field, we send one phone and then we get back the other phone with the information. We go to a city and then we upload all the information from them. Very simple, but...
Simple and very manual process, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, connectivity has been an issue for us, but in recent times we had to get a router so that we don't have to wait for the feed managers to come to town before downloading the data, so they can actually download the data with router when they are out of the protected area. That makes the work easy for us.
Okay. So that's a mobile, like a mobile Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from our side, we work in the most remote places. And of course, one of the major challenges is when the communities get data. Now, the main issue is to upload the data and also to download the data. I think connectivity is one of the major issues that we face. And also trying to look for people who can easily understand how to collect data in Smart. Of course, Smart is user-friendly, but sometimes it takes time to build that capacity so that the CCOs are well acquainted with data entry, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, I think it's also about maybe language barrier, how to even translate what is on the Smart mobile or Smart, what is expected to be collected without losing its meaning. That is a very big challenge. It might seem like it's minor, but that's a very big challenge, especially when you are training community members.
That's the translation of technical terms?
Yeah, translation of technical terms to a language that they'll understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'll just add a quick one. Our rangers actually do a pretty good job collecting data, but invariably they're going to make a few mistakes. And I think one of our challenges has been, in some ways, Smart Mobile connected to the desktop has made it almost too easy to bring in patrols, and creating kind of this opportunity where you can think everything's fine and just move on. And keeping up with the administration and the checking of data to make sure it's accurate has been a bit of a challenge for us. We still find a lot of sort of obvious mistakes, just misclassifications, employees that were added that weren't actually there. So we've created a few checklists that our administrators now are meant to go through for each patrol, just to kind of, also keep them sort of in a space of remembering to do all of this, because we also have a lot of moving parts with different things going on at the same time, not a lot of staff to do administration. So that's an ongoing challenge for us.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit in my presentation as well. Yeah, we're trying best to manage issues like connectivity and access, but I don't think we'll be able to overcome them anytime soon unless more infrastructure occurs within use. One thing we're looking in the future, which is sort of complementing Smart and using range, is probably trying to deploy more automated sensing technologies in the future, camera traps for exploring and sort of eDNA tools, and bioacoustic monitoring and soundscape monitoring, things to complement those direct monitoring methods we have through using Smart and range patrols, and also to try and give us ways of accessing other parts of the landscape that we can't do regularly, and to be able to collect more long-term data.
Yeah, and just coming back to the idea of the training, I find like if I go into a community and I'm like, it's really easy, you just have to use your phone and do this, I get a lot of skepticism. But if you end up with an active harvester from another community that has used it, and they sit down and show another harvester, like peer-to-peer training, that seems to be facilitated. Partly, I think, language, and also just, if I can do it, you can do it kind of thing. So, yeah, that's been big for us.
Bueno, nosotros entendemos que el SMART es una buena herramienta, una herramienta fundamental, pero no es la finalidad, no es el fin, sino es un medio para lograr el cumplimiento de los objetivos de conservación, ¿no?
I don't know if Diego is going to translate now, or...
León is saying that SMART is fundamental, but it's not the only tool that we need to use for conservation.
Al ser un medio, entonces a nosotros nos interesa más medir la efectividad de las acciones de manejo, como los planes de manejo, los acuerdos comunales, más que el impacto que tiene el SMART en todo este proceso, ¿no? Tenemos indicadores que miden si se está cumpliendo los acuerdos o si se está respetando los planes de manejo. Por eso decía que el SMART es un medio y no es la finalidad, ¿no? La finalidad es la conservación de los recursos, el manejo de los recursos, sosteniblemente.
Yeah, SMART is not the objective. implementing smart is not the objective. The objective is to have an effective management of the resources.
Thank you.
So just a follow-up question on some of the items you mentioned. I wonder if sometimes, again, I think I said this earlier, I'm the chair of the Technology Council for the partnership. Ostensibly, I should be, leading on the front foot of all, technology innovation in our partnership. But sometimes I go into calls and I feel like a bit like a Luddite, right? Because I'm arguing how much connectivity is still an issue for sites. And yes, we can embrace the most exciting tools, the most integrated tools, and we should for the sites that's viable at. But I'm just wondering, for those of you, because several of you have mentioned connectivity, I know connectivity is an issue here in Namibia as well, is, these things like Starlink or any of the longer range communication methods, have you tested any of them? Are you trying or looking to try any of these? Do you think that these will be, be able to bridge a gap for you, or is it just, pie in the sky?
Yeah, for the connectivity issues, recently we were able to get the Starlink. That's for the main office. So while I stated we are still having connectivity issues before is in the protected area, because we expect the Echo Guards or the Rangers to download, they'll sync their data to connect right from the field, rather than coming down to town to download the data to the desktop before syncing. So for the office, we've been able to sort out the connectivity issue by getting Starlink. We're currently using Starlink now. While for the field staff, we're using mobile Wi-Fi for them to be able to download the data to desktop and sync to smart.
In the case of Ecuador, we want to try Starlink in the communities that have electricity, but we want that the internet becomes sustainable. So we know that if we provide a Starlink antenna, they are going to use for smart and for everything else. So how can we ensure that this internet will be sustainable through time? Because as WCS, we can afford to pay months, maybe years, but then what? So we are thinking how to make this sustainable. And a year ago, I heard an experience for Zambia. So they have like hubs of internet. So when you go to a hub, you are able to use the internet for whatever you want to use, and you have to pay like a little bit. And this becomes like a savings, and then the community have the money to pay the next month of internet. So maybe we are going to pilot some of these ideas to see how it works.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I'm aware that the WCS park in the bottom of South America also has tried Starlink for the last year, and it's working very, very well. And they are very far away.
Great. That's good to hear. Now just get it to PNG and you'll solve all your problems, right?
Yeah, I think the electricity access is a bit of an issue, and I agree with sort of the sustainability of technology that you bring into areas, particularly where there's other, really pressing development issues that are going on as well concurrently. My dad just got Starlink at his farm in Australia, so I need to chat with him. But yeah, no, I think with all of these technologies that are evolving, it's nice to see these pathways forward that have been trialled and worked out, and provide, I guess, a well-trodden path when other areas become more developed and that infrastructure is available, that the path is clear there, I guess, for us to follow. But yeah, we have looked at that sort of stuff, but not something. I think we're focusing still more on getting processes working really well, and then we can look at, raising to that next step of efficiency.
Great. And just a comment, as we have we got a little bit of time left. If anybody else in the audience has a question, just raise your hand and we'd be happy to take them. Just one more comment on the previous question. For the a few of you that mentioned the language barrier. Have you tried any of the just using the icons and just using the imagery for the data collection on Smart Mobile?
Yeah, so with the language barrier, the only thing that really works is the icons.
It did.
Yeah, the icons works very well. The only issue is now the training phase, the very first time we are training them. The way they should translate the icons, really,
Yeah.
like, it should make sense. Even if the icon is there, it should make sense. So, but the icons are really working.
Well, we can also make new icons too, so, yeah.
No, they're okay, they're perfect.
Okay. Yeah. I see Jonathan's in the audience here, and I will give credit to Jonathan years ago when we were like, we're going to develop some icons. He's like, we should develop what did you call it? I think a vocabulary, right? A standard vocabulary for the icons. And, you know, it's very hard to do abstract concepts for, you know, all these different things that are going to be globally applicable. But I think the feedback we have gotten is that the icons have been good, so that's great. Did you have a comment? No? Okay.
On the icon,
Yeah.
would you be able to, you've already created tools to put audios into Smart Mobile. Could you attach an audio onto an icon where somebody could say whatever it is in the local language or something, and you could press it and it would play it, so they would know that icon would mean? Obviously, they'd only need to obviously hear it a few times and they'd figure it out, but.
That's a good suggestion for maybe want to take a note, anybody? Yeah, that's a good suggestion for mobile. So just like an audio prompt for a category, yeah. Okay. Any other thing? This is a bit of an aside, but things like that are really helpful to hear. I remember the first conversations we were having with the polar bear folks, and they were like, well, we really need to figure out a way to make it a little bit more user-friendly to enter data on smartphones when it's like -40 degrees. It's hard for people to take off their gloves and do that. And so we were talking about, you know, very, very thick, very, you know, easily manipulatable stylus to, yeah. Challenges that you don't often face when you work in Africa, yeah. So next question, just moving along. Just wanted to see if you've thought about how you quantify the implementation of these tools, right? I mean, a lot of you were talking about there's been improvements, and if you're able to quantify, you know, before we were using these conservation tools, we were successful. We've now implemented this, and it's changed in X, Y, and Z way.
Yeah, I think I would, from my experience and from our side, I think SMART has been really a game changer, moving from collecting data on paper. Then we now have maybe a centralized more system of collecting data, and that has been easy in terms of officers collect data, you just download and you write a report within less than a minute. Once you've configured that report, I think SMART has been really helpful in that regard.
Yeah, having a database that has historical information or historical data, I think that's a game changer, because what would happen is the paper will get filed, then you'll not have anywhere to put the files after like 5 years, especially when you have so many rangers. But just having a system where everything is stored in one place and on the server, I think that's something that's incredible.
And did the communities you work with feel the same way?
Yes, yes. And actually, lots of data sheets. You'll go to collect data sheets from the communities, and they'll tell you that my child used it. So what would you do? But now if they're collecting it with their phone, it's just sending it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in addition to those things, it's exactly the same for us. And I think we've found SMART useful in being able to quantify those things. It's also been addressing when we've been engaging with the community and telling us what we're not doing well and we're not doing enough. And so by presenting these results back to communities at some of the different forums we've had through land use planning, particularly land use planning. It's been identifying, where patrol efforts been focused and what are the outcomes of that, and how they haven't been addressing some of the community needs, which has spurred the development of a new land use monitoring guide for us and recruiting a new land use monitoring officer and building a new data model. So it's been really good at also showing us what we haven't been doing, which is also, I guess, a measure of how effective the implementation has been in meeting those overarching priorities.
And I also feel to some extent it has also changed the way communities also view conservation organizations, because if you give a community member a smartphone, they've never handled a smartphone. Like, they'll be viewed like the most important person in that community. So they'll want to get associated with working with conservation organizations, and in return they value wildlife. Yeah.
Anything else?
Just a couple things from our perspective. I think for myself, who does most of the report writing and what have you, I don't have a precise figure, but I do remember a decade ago sitting down every year with the National Rhino Coordinator, taking about 2 weeks literally to put together our annual report with hundreds of ID forms and sifting through photographs, and now we can do it in a couple days. It's really increased the efficiency of how we, and that's with about 10 to 13 times the amount of information we used to have as well. So I think that's a no-brainer. But I think from the community perspective too, what we've also been hearing, and this is, I think, really leveraged by now the national rollout of SMART, is it's a huge opportunity for rangers to learn SMART, learn how to use SMART, because the parks, the government's using it, and it's become kind of this universal tool now that people are seeing future job opportunities open up because they're being exposed to SMART, they're learning this tool, and that's a huge motivational factor, I think, for those people.
I also feel like it has really helped with evidence-based decision-making, especially with the attributes where you have to take photos. When you're dealing with human-wildlife conflict, you cannot just go and collect data with a data sheet and say this and this happened. But using Smart Mobile and having that option of taking photos, it's really helped with decisions that are evidence-based.
I'm just going to add, this is somewhat tangential to the conversation, but one of the new features in Smart 8, which is most exciting to me, is this ability specifically for human-wildlife conflict. So you can create a tag for a specific photo, and then you can, in your report, pull that tag directly into the report. And so, if you have a situation where you have, evidence photo of the goat that's been killed, you have to take a specific evidence photo. That'll be a category or an attribute in the data model. So you press that, you take a photo, and then it pulls it right into the report. Anybody that's had to add photos to reports in Smart, it can be a bit of a tedious process. They're all saved, and we've improved it, but it still can be challenging. And I know for the system that we are piloting here in Namibia, the idea is to have a form with all of the photos there, and it's a very small change, but it is I'm very excited about it. I'm really looking forward to it, and specifically for that thing. You're going to have to take specific photos at specific investigation sites, and you can populate the report automatically with those photos. Anyway, put aside my excitement for a moment.
Drew? Are those tags alike? Is that attribute going to be a list or a text, an open text, or something else? The tags that you were mentioning.
Have you seen the signature feature in Smart 7? I can show you after. It's just I don't know exactly what the term is, but it's a tag, and it's being generalized, and so you can set it up, and it'll just be like any other attribute you collect when you're in the field. Okay, we just got a couple more minutes, and again, if there's any questions, feel free. But I just wanted, the last question just on the idea of sustainability, right? So we've talked about, Smart is free, But there are costs associated with this, right? There's continual operations costs, there's continual training costs. If you're using Connect or you're using devices in the field like most of you are, you have to continually buy this hardware. So I'm just wondering, for you working communities, you've now all talked about how this is working for you and the communities have embraced it and you're doing well and expanding, but do you have any concerns about sustainability moving forward, or do you have any plans about how you sustain the monitoring that you're doing, at least in the long term, if not in perpetuity?
Yeah, I think in terms of sustainability, one of our wish and our aim is that is to empower the community. Whenever that's maybe if we stop maybe offering that support, they can take it up and they can continue from wherever we will stop, if we will. Yeah, so I think for us, we are building that capacity in the community to take up a smart from themselves to use as smart as their own tool for monitoring their natural resources.
That we are really advocating for is citizen science. So it's not necessarily something that is being imposed on you. It's something that is important for you. So if you just do it because you're just being a good citizen science, then you just, we don't have any operational costs because they just do the same way. They use their phones for WhatsApp, for whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, for us in the Mbe Mountain, training is a continuous activity for us, for our eco guards. We carry out routine training quarterly for them, like 4 times in a year for them. Thank you.
Sí, en el caso de comunidades es muy diferente a áreas protegidas administradas por el Estado, donde en áreas administradas por el Estado pueden adquirir equipos o puede haber personas detrás que están en la implementación de esta herramienta, ¿no? En el caso de comunidades, si queremos que el uso del SMART sea sostenible en el tiempo, en comunidades tenemos que, o el SMART tiene que demostrar al poblador o al comunero que es útil para su uso, ¿no? ¿A través de qué? De repente de que el mismo Smart Móvil te dé la información ya analizada, ¿no? Para hacer seguimiento de uso de recursos. Por ejemplo, en las comunidades hay cuotas de extracción de mamíferos, no cuotas de caza. Entonces, ¿cómo yo, de presidente comunal o de APU, que lo llamamos, puedo medir si un comunero está cazando 30 individuos, si va a llegar a su cuota o ha sobrepasado su cuota? Entonces, a lo que me refiero es que el SMART, para que sea sostenible en comunidades, tiene que demostrar que es útil para recojo de información, pero también para un análisis bien fácil, ni siquiera usando computadoras, solo usando el teléfono, y te pueda analizar toda la información, ¿no? Eso sería una sugerencia para que el SMART en comunidades sea sostenible, porque si no es así, no va a ser sostenible, ¿no? Mientras no haya personas detrás o instituciones detrás, no va a ser sostenible en las comunidades, ¿no?
I can do this. So León is saying that there is a very, very direct or strong difference between what are communities and national parks administered by the government. Of course, the ones administered by the government, they have a budget on an annual basis for trainings and devices and so on. However, the communities, they have to sustain it by themselves. And León is saying, one of the ideas that he's proposing is that, or the concept is that SMART to be sustainable in the communities has to prove its value. And proving its value in the communities means 2 things. The first one is the data collection, that of course it's accomplished, But the second one is to provide them at least some kind of basic analysis, which is actually what the word that León used, but potentially not even getting into a computer, but maybe through a mobile device. He's suggesting that even smart mobile could potentially do this. I personally believe that if there is internet connection, which I doubt is the case over there, there are ways to handle it through other platforms online. But basically, the main consideration from León is that that smartphone, to be sustainable, has to provide more than data collection at these communities.
Sí, finalmente el uso de los teléfonos o la implementación con teléfonos no es una limitante para el uso del SMART en comunidades, ya que ellos involucran el teléfono personal que tienen los comuneros para el registro de información. Entonces, la cantidad de equipos no es una limitante. Lo que sí es una limitante es que con el Smart Móvil no se puede hacer muchas cosas, ¿no? Solamente el registro de información, pero no te puede hacer el análisis de la información que lo puede hacer un comunero, ¿no?
Yeah, so he's saying that there is not a limitation regarding devices, mobile devices, because the community members actually do have their own devices and they use them on a daily basis, and that's where they have installed the mobile app, but they don't have access to a computer. And that's where he's proposing, could we get potentially other extra smart mobile or something else that could provide a dashboard or something like that in the mobile devices directly to create information from the data. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, if there's any questions, raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll just say thank you to the panelists. And just a round of applause to them for giving us their time. Thank you. Okay, coffee break for a short while, and then we'll have the last sessions before the plenary. Thank you.